Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today we will be going through a few reasons why Labour's personnel, their ex-advisors, current advisors and councillors apparently are just some of the most evil people we currently have in the country. And unfortunately, it's one of those the road to hell is paved with good intentions type things. Unfortunately, as usual, it is proving this undefeated heat map better than ever, where all these concentric circles represent people within your family and whether you care about them or not, generally then expanding to extended family, friends and relatives, moving out to people in your country, then all people, and as it goes further and further out it starts to get to inanimate objects, including rocks and all things in the universe. And this is actually kind of worse than I originally thought with this graph. When I first saw it and saw people explaining it, I thought it was just, friends and family are what Conservatives care about, people outside of the in-group, people in other countries, are what Liberals care about. No, their heat map is actually most intense over number 14, which is all living things in the universe, including plants and trees. Effectively, it's worse than I thought. I thought it was just an outgroup thing. It turns out that outgroup actually doesn't really include people at all. It just includes everything that isn't a human. So my mindset of Liberals are just anti-humans, in terms of leftists, obviously, it seems to actually come true quite a lot. But unfortunately for Labour, it's much closer to we prefer the outgroup of people outside of Britain compared to those inside Britain. And so we may as well get into the first clip, which is from a GB News debate where ex-Labour advisor Mick Buckley literally finds out that we have a teacher in Britain who is literally in hiding because of an Islamist mob.
We also have a teacher still in hiding in this country for being seen to have criticised the religion of Islam. I mean, where does the Labour Party and the Labour government stand on that?
What did that particular teacher say or do, if you don't mind my asking? I wasn't aware of this particular
Well, you see, that in itself speaks volumes.
I'm completely on Matt Goodwin's side here, and if you don't follow Matt Goodwin on Twitter or subscribe to him on YouTube, absolutely do that. He does regular live streams and is regularly announcing his political activism. He's a great guy, part of Reform now. I think he'll be massively helpful in helping Reform get bigger and bigger in the polls. But yeah, this Labour advisor, who now works as director for UK-EU Commission, which effectively just tries to improve UK and EU relations, doesn't actually know what's going on in his own country. Like, this made national news. You know, even my parents knew about this, so this clearly got quite into normie sphere. Yet Labour Party advisors on international relations don't know what is going on in our country and how much of a disaster it is. And it's quite interesting that instantly he finds out he's in hiding, and instantly the question is, well, what did he do wrong? As if anyone in the UK should be in hiding for any reason. If he did something wrong, he should be in jail, not hiding from a mob.
You're not aware that a secondary school teacher from Batley is still in hiding with his family in this country because a local mob basically put his life in danger because he had appeared or was perceived to have criticised.
I wasn't aware. No, what do you know what he said or did?
This is a national.
The school teacher.
No.
This is another reason, by the way, why I think Matt Goodwin is quite smart with the way he deals with debates like this. He won't directly say what he did. He'll just get to the core of the issue, which was, he was perceived as to be criticising Islam, which does get to the core of the issue, and then obviously that puts the other person in a position to either have to defend that or concede ground already to Matt Goodwin, which helps him in the debate. But yeah, I share Michelle Dewberry's shock here. I kind of cannot believe that a senior Labour advisor or ex-advisor, a person who independently, quote-unquote, works on EU-UK relations, doesn't know issues that we currently have in the UK. And hell, issues that are going on over in the EU as well. We're not, the EU has problems with Islamist mobs as well. We're seeing that right now in Amsterdam. But as I say, this is the type of person that just has a massive blind spot for that, because as the almighty graph showed at the beginning, he cares more about plants and trees than he does his own family. So of course he's going to ignore all this. Anyway, Michelle Dewberry refreshes us with the story that, yes, this teacher, showed a picture of Mohammed in the classroom. Obviously, Muslim parents found out. They started protesting, and then it got a little bit more, well, direct with the death threats, I guess we'll say. And so, yes, this teacher has had to go into hiding pretty much for good. You know, I remember covering this, 3 years ago now? You know, as I always say, normal island. This is just completely normal.
If he's an RE teacher, he must have known that within Islam it is blasphemous to depict the Prophet Muhammad in visual form to show what may be a picture of him.
This is the UK and we don't have
yes, it is.
laws.
Yeah, this is exactly the answer that Matt Goodwin was trying to worm out of this guy. Oh, he was seen to criticise Islam. Oh, okay, can you go into specifics? Oh, well, he showed a picture of Muhammad in an RE lesson to effectively inform the kids that this has happened and ended up with a terrorist attack. And basically, what Mike is saying here is, oh, why is he showing this if it ended up in a terrorist attack? Didn't he know that this was going to be a consequence? To which, yeah, Michelle points out, well, it should never be a consequence that you show a picture of Muhammad in the UK and end up with death threats and having to go into hiding. The same with that poor autistic kid who scuffed a Quran. I can't even remember why. He just brought a Quran into school and it got scuffed a bit. And they had to do this whole force this apology out of the mother while all the police were there basically saying, oh, very good job, thank you for apologising, right, stop sending her death threats. A completely backwards way we should be running the country.
But it was a very unwise and unnecessary thing for him to do.
Wow, so
it was bound to result in a reaction. I'm not glad that he's in hiding.
Excuse me, are you justifying in this country?
He made a mistake.
UK, so that means that he deserves to have a price put on his head and hounded out of his position?
I'm not saying that for a minute.
You literally just played Apologia for that dude. I love it. They do this every time. Oh, don't you know that it's a bad move to show a picture of Muhammad? Don't you know that that's going to end up with Islamist mobs that we've brought into this country coming after you? Oh, so he deserved it then? No, I'm not saying that at all. You are literally saying that.
But to do that and not expect that there would be a reaction...
You just said the teacher made a mistake.
Yes, he did.
Right, so what we're seeing...
A very silly one that was bound to result in a reaction.
This is like a...
Yeah, but the point in our laws and our police is that people are protected from those completely unjustifiable reactions. But as I say, this guy cares more about plants and trees than his own family. So, of course he's going to side with the outsider, you know, this Islamist mob that we've brought in, instead of the Batley and Spen teacher, who was presumably British, presumably trying to educate our children in a way that Britain wants their children educated. You know, oh, look, here's a picture of Muhammad, this was printed by a French magazine, here's what happened to them. You know, think critically, is this a good or a bad thing? And that's ended up with him having to go into hiding, because apparently the people who thought it was a good thing, well, de facto it's their law, isn't it?
I think it's very clear to viewers what your view is of this, which is that we must bend our laws, our culture, our ways.
I'm not saying that at all, but
you said the teacher...
to do something which is going to be grossly offensive. I mean, I don't know whether there are any Muslims in the class.
Then he shouldn't have done it.
To do something, for a teacher to do something which is grossly offensive to a cohort of people in his class is an awful thing.
It wasn't.
See, this is the thing with school, though. Part of it is to almost indoctrinate the kids into certain sensibilities, and the left understand this. The left have understood this for years, hence the curriculum is as bad as it is. You know, they recently tried to get Shakespeare out of the English GCSE curriculum. They didn't manage it because at least they understand that there needs to be some red meat for us, British nationalists. But yeah, effectively, what this ex-Labour advisor is saying, quite directly I would add, is that we need to change the sensibilities of teaching away from, oh, it doesn't matter if we make people uncomfortable, they need to understand this, that and the other. You know, I was shown pictures of the Holocaust when I was at school, for God's sake. But now, oh, these special interest people who we've imported in, no, we need to go out of our way to not offend them. And it's like, you know, in this lesson, do you necessarily need to show the picture of it? Probably not. However, there's nothing illegal about doing it. I would say it's actually bringing important context into the discussion anyway. And for the reaction that it got, I think it's completely unreasonable. And I don't think he should be in hiding. And I think instead everyone who sent a death threat should either be in jail, or if they are, you know, a foreigner with no British citizenship, deported. That is what we should do, but we don't do that. No, instead, we put the guy into hiding and protection. Why? Because nobody wants to deal with the actual issue. They'd rather just keep kicking the can down the road. How many people in hiding is acceptable? I wonder.
Charlie Hebdo were wrong to have made depictions of the religion of Islam.
Why do something that you know is grossly offensive to a section of your community?
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Okay, so
I really don't.
Do you not think it's important to tell the kids what happened at Charlie Hebdo? You know, should we stop teaching 9/11 because people died in it? Should we stop teaching about Kristallnacht and the Holocaust because it might offend Jewish people to learn what happened to other Jews during that time in the mid-century Germany? Or, you know, should we just censor this part of the curriculum because as part of teaching it for the wider context, showing the picture of Muhammad is part of that particular lesson? Do we just forget about the Charlie Hebdo incident now? Because that's the next step. You can't talk about the Charlie Hebdo incident without bringing up the image of Muhammad. And to an extent, as I say, not necessarily necessary, but it certainly gives a wider context to the lesson. And as we can tell, the guy's not been arrested. In fact, he's in police protection, so he clearly did nothing wrong. But as this Labour ex-advisor says, oh, aren't you expecting this reaction? I honestly don't think he was. I honestly think this teacher thought these people have come to Britain, therefore they will have British sensibilities. And as it turns out, yeah, it was a mistake. And Labour's answer to that is, well, you made the mistake. Enjoy your time in hiding. What a ridiculous answer.
I am saying, why do something, either as a teacher or as a magazine, in the case, which is a French magazine, by the way, in case you've...
Why do it? Because you want to express your views freely in a liberal democracy.
I mean, obviously, bang on from Matt Goodwin. I've got absolutely nothing wrong with what he said there. But again, Mike is already going with the presupposition of, oh, why do things that are going to end with you having to go into hiding? I mean, he's basically justifying might means right, which, you know, technically that is true, but the problem is that the might means right is supposed to entirely come from the Crown. It's not supposed to come from mobs that have appeared over the past 40 years or so. You know, some people would call that an invasion. But not only that, he also brings up, oh, it was a French magazine, by the way. Okay. Again, I don't know exactly what the lesson was on, but if it's about depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, it's pretty relevant. Like, obviously he'd go internationally with it anyway. You know, he probably brought up the satanic verse as well by Salman Rushdie, who, by the way, again recently was stabbed in the eye. You know, did Salman Rushdie deserve that, I wonder? I have no idea. This guy would probably say yes. I just can't believe how much he's doubling down. This is making Labour look absolutely mad. I know he's ex-Labour, but there are definitely people in Labour who probably go even further than what this guy is saying.
But there's no need to enrage or grossly offend a section of your community, whether you're a teacher or whether you're a magazine.
So in which case we should...
I don't go around thinking it's my right as freedom of speech to be able to offend people.
Well, as Jordan Peterson put it best, in order to think you have to risk being offensive. And if you want to make it your prerogative to not risk offending absolutely everyone you meet, let's admit it, as he keeps saying, certain cohorts, that's your prerogative. But that doesn't mean that rule should apply to everyone else. You know, there are other people that do want to use their freedom of speech to offend people, and that's fine. That's like half of comedy. But it is certainly absolutely insane to have to live your life with everyone else's sensibilities front and centre in your mind. It's just not a reasonable thing to go about doing in your life. No, telling the truth is much more important than not risking offending anyone, obviously.
Okay, so we should limit free speech and free expression on the altar of not offending minority groups.
All of us live in a world in which our free speech and our expression is limited by the fact that we live in a decent society, and indeed there are laws out there that stop us saying or doing certain things.
Yes, there's libel laws, and I mean, this is an appeal to legality rather than morality. It's so annoying. Oh, there's some limits on speech, therefore absolute free speech can never work. Absolute free speechists are not absolute free speechists, as odd as that sounds. People understand the need for defamation and libel laws. Right? People understand the need for them. But people being happy with those laws doesn't mean that people should think that everyone who has lied in their life should go to jail. It's not how it works. Obviously, it's about finding the line, and as I keep saying, John Stuart Mill found the line pretty accurately. Basically, defamation and libel laws, absolutely fine. And also, if you have a big angry mob and you point at someone and say, oh, they're like hiding food from you or something and then they get beat up for it, that should be illegal too. Immediate, measurable action is the line. And if you're trying to argue that showing a picture of Mohammed is measurable immediate action, you are a moron. Because that is obviously not the same as saying beat me up. That is saying, look at this picture, do you agree that people should have died for it? And if people say yes, I'd be quite worried. And that just so happens to be what this ex-Labour person is kind of implying while at the same time denying it.
That is the price that we all pay for living in a decent society.
There are no laws against what this teacher did.
But nonetheless, it was clearly unwise. I'm very sorry.
Matt Goodwin does always pull the best facial expressions, but yeah, you can't help but laugh at that. Oh, you just appeal to legality. Oh, well, this wasn't illegal. Yeah, it was still stupid, though. Like, he deserves to get beat up for it. What? Just take the side of the guy. You're just digging yourself a hole for, like, no reason here.
You're basically willing to sacrifice the pillars of liberal democracy on the altar of not offending a minority
the pillar
group.
of liberal democracy is I have the right to grossly offend a section of the community.
It's called
that is not a pillar of liberal democracy.
It's so weird that a Labour man would say this out of everyone. The Labour movement pretty much came about, not necessarily intentionally, but as a kind of offence to the, I guess, capital class, if you want to call it that. Certainly business owners and lords. You know, it was offensive to them, the idea of workers unionising and making collective demands. And yet this guy's saying, oh, well, it would have offended them, but can't do that. But this is the thing, you know, he's the type of person that's going to be very selective about which groups of people you can and can't offend. I wouldn't be shocked if he's called people gammon in the past, for example. But this is the thing, there's a reason he keeps adding the little suffix of certain cohorts of people. Because he doesn't care if he offends the in-group, you know, British people. He cares only about protecting the out-group and plants and trees.
It's called free speech, in which case I suggest...
But can I just...
Free speech does not give you the right to grossly offend a section of the community.
Right.
I think that'll do for that clip, but it's just one of the most absurd things that you can possibly say. You know, I've quite literally grown up in a world where being a Christian has just been... It's been open season to offend Christians. And this guy doesn't care. This guy probably thinks it's a good thing, actually, so... It's where the madness of progressivism has led all these people down, frankly, a quite dark path that they are willing to fight tooth and nail to defend. But unfortunately, this is not the only Labour personnel that we are going to be covering, or at least former Labour advisor, because here's another former Labour advisor, John McTernan, talking about the inheritance tax change that is very likely going to be rather destroying family farms.
A privileged status for their farms, and I think that may or may not be right. I'm personally in favour of doing to farmers who want to go on the streets, we can do to them what Margaret Thatcher did to the miners.
Yeah, frankly, this is just open desire for retribution. I guess for a quick summary of what Margaret Thatcher did to the miners, when she first came in, she effectively kowtowed to them slightly because they didn't have the coal stockpiles to deal with a general strike that they were threatening. But then once the plan was in place and the stockpiles were there, she effectively went to town on them, pulled the power from under their feet, sold off plenty of their assets, closed a few mines, but not as many as Labour, by the way. Ended up actually paying quite a few people, even some 30-year-olds, to effectively go on a pension for the rest of their lives. Effectively paid off quite a few of them. They got quite a good deal from it. Arthur Scargill, head of the Miners' Union, has ended up in a millionaire's mansion ever since. But ultimately, the main grievance is that Margaret Thatcher managed to effectively kill off some industrial towns. Some survived by changing their specialisation, and these miners had to go find other jobs if they weren't on pensions. It certainly could have been done better, but you've got to realise that these unions were bringing the country to their knees, and in 78, I believe, we had the Winter of Discontent, in which there was a general strike. You know, electricity was not running on the power grid, bodies were piling up in the streets, garbage was piling up in the streets. It was a few months of, from what I've been told by people who lived through it, pretty disastrous living. Hence Margaret Thatcher won by a landslide, and then kept winning by landslides for her next 3 elections. However, what Labour are doing to the farmers is quite different. They are literally just extracting wealth. If you die and own a farm worth over £1 million, which pretty much every farm is, because one of how big they are and how much land they take up, I think it's a few acres over that you're pretty much going to have to be paying inheritance tax. And it's basically going to end up with people having to give up on farming because they won't be able to afford that. They'll have to sell the farm off. And this guy's kind of just saying, good, I'm glad. I hope these people that never vote Labour basically end up poor and can't farm anymore, which is just pure evil as far as I care. The farming union didn't bring the country to its knees like the unions of the 70s did. It's a completely different story. This is all just happening because they don't vote Labour. They're never going to get the vote, so they can do what they want to them. And so I hope that they do end up shutting London down, because how the hell are we supposed to eat if we don't have farms? I know we import a lot of food, but 60% of our food does still come from British farms, so probably not a good idea to ruin that sector when we all need to eat at the end of the day.
So just to be clear, John, you would, beat them up?
No, close them. This industry we could do without.
What, you want to beat them up because the police did get in scuffs with the miners' union, to which he says, no, effectively, I want them eviscerated. We don't need a farming industry, which is just got to be one of the maddest things I've ever heard. Where does this guy think his food comes from?
So, okay, all right, so this got weird. So you would do to farmers what Margaret Thatcher did to miners, which was, she used very heavy-handed police tactics, followed by what? Putting them out of business.
If people are so upset that they want to go on the streets and spray slurry on them, then we don't need the small farmers.
Yeah, but they're threatening to protest because, these are farms that have probably been in families for possibly centuries, but certainly at least generations. If you watch Clarkson's farm, it's all very Trumpton, I guess you could say. All very local community. Everyone knows everyone else. Everyone wants to help everyone else. Whenever there's someone on camera, another farmer saying, oh, we're struggling because of foot and mouth disease or something like that, it's instant just, okay, tell you what, we'll have a plan to help you out here. We'll make our own local restaurant. And then non-local councils, i.e. the county council rather than the town council, stop that from happening. And then the locals do everything they can to get it working because all the locals want it. And effectively what this Labour ex-advisor is saying is, we're the powers that be now. We want to destroy all these small farms. We don't need them because look at them. We're literally stealing from them and they're lashing out from it. That's our money. They can't lash out because we're taking our money that's rightfully ours. It's just crazy. What a crazy clip.
Right. Okay, John, I'm not sure that's a particular... You were, just to clarify, you were a former Labour special advisor, possibly emphasis on the word former there, but just to go on...
Yeah, Patrick Christie's absolutely correct to point out that even though he is a former Labour advisor, it's probably not far out of the realm of possibilities that he's still working for them in his new role. And this isn't the first time this guy's gone on GB News to just say some of the most insane things imaginable. Here's a clip from a few months ago.
What about the over 140 arrests at the Black Lives Matter riots? What about when officers have been firebombed of Labour MPs by pro-Palestine protesters? Do you share similar chagrin for that? Or is your chagrin only directed at white people?
Fair question. This was around the time of the summer riots after the Southport incident. Once again, Martin Daubeney's and even my point is that, well, you shouldn't riot. It's bad all over the place. And obviously this is in the middle of a conversation where once again, Mr. McTurnan is effectively having a massive go at these rioters, which, again, is probably reasonable to some extent. He's probably doing it in an unreasonable way, though, whereas Martin Daubeney is doing a bit of whataboutism, but it's good to see if these people are consistent or not.
So the disturbances at the end of one of the Black Lives Matter rallies was dealt with by the police properly. And people were arrested and prosecuted properly. That's what the police do. They arrest and prosecute people possibly. But the notion that there are any legitimate concerns being expressed by racist rioters is utterly untrue.
I'd like to remind people that the outrage was about quite a few girls being stabbed, a few of them to death. If that is not a legitimate concern, I don't know what is.
and their actions should be condemned. And the notion that they represent or speak for anybody is the most condescending thing that I've ever heard.
It's kind of amazing that they always do this. Again, this is a guy who prefers plants and trees to his own countrymen. And I kind of can't believe that he's saying it's condescending to say that them having legitimate concerns and that they represent, to an extent, the concerns of many people. That's somehow condescending. Saying they don't have any legitimate concerns whatsoever apparently isn't condescending. This guy's just insane. As I say, he sees trees and plants as people more than his own countrymen, so bearing that in mind, all of this makes sense. And again, it's a pretty accurate definition of evil.
See, what I don't understand is why you think that people who demonstrating about refugees, asylum seekers in a hotel in Rotherham and try to burn them alive or anything other than racist.
Well, nobody's defending that. Certainly nobody's defending... I've not seen anyone defend the action of burning the hotel down. Nobody thinks that's a good thing to do. Everyone thinks that people who did that should be arrested. They're fine with that. But, you know, someone killed themselves in jail the other week because he, quote-unquote, shouted at police. And you actually watch the footage. That is actually pretty much all he did. And if it's an arrestable offence to be part of these demonstrations, shout at the police, and be in the vicinity of the hotel being set on fire, that is clearly just overreach from the state. I honestly kind of can't believe that that is being defended by anyone.
Look, you go along to a racist riot, you're a racist.
That's everyone who went to the Black Lives Matter marches being called a racist there. Nice.
That's it. It's really straightforward. There's no difficulty for me to say that you're attending a racist riot, you're throwing rocks at the police, you're trying to hold the police off from enforcing law and order, and you're doing that on behalf of racists who are trying to burn people alive. You're a racist.
Wow, he's really going hard on Black Lives Matter here. Go off, King.
You're trying to distinguish between good rioters and bad rioters. There's no such thing.
I'm talking about people at social protests. Okay, you're allowed to protest, but then when it kicks off, you then say, well, everyone was racist at the outset.
Yeah, there's a bit of a weird obsession with the left wing when it came to those riots that, there were no legitimate protests. Like, the problem is that the legitimate protests were completely drowned out by the news of the riots. And then obviously when there was the AstroTurfed counter protest against all those fake... the fake riots that they were talking about the Wednesday after, the same picture was used for absolutely every front page. It was quite amazing to see. I mean, obviously they didn't descend into rioting, but there were legitimate protests going on at the same time that did not devolve into violence. The people that did devolve it into violence and were rioting, lock them away. That's absolutely fine. But as I say, the guy who killed himself was literally just shouting at police because he was frustrated. And then people set the hotel on fire. It wasn't anything to do with that, and he was still put in jail. But as you can tell, to Labour and their advisors, at least former advisors, he may have been an advisor at the time actually, I'm not sure, it's absolutely reasonable to say, oh, well, they were in the vicinity and they're white and they were expressing these concerns, therefore, it's fine to throw them in jail. And if they kill themselves, oh, well, that's one racist less in the world. And other clips came out of the guy, and he was just a reasonable guy, local to the place. He was just concerned about a whole bunch of strangers being stocked up into local hotels. It's perfectly reasonable. But according to this former Labour advisor, much like the farmers, he effectively just wants them all dead, because he sees plants and trees as more human than his own countrymen.
People didn't go to those riots thinking they were attending a prayer vigil. They knew what they were attending. They were attending a racist riot.
I mean, what, you think these things just delved into violence as soon as, 5 people turned up? No, it delved into riot over the course of the day. Some people literally went to watch it, just see what was going on, realise it was a riot, stayed out of the way of it, but kept witnessing. I know people that did this. The people I know didn't get arrested, though. But yeah, someone in Belfast just got arrested just for being there. I've not seen a follow-up on that story at all, but hopefully he's not been put in jail or anything. People go out to these protests not necessarily expecting a riot. If people stayed around and threw rocks at the police, yeah, absolutely, but not everyone did that. It was a minority. It is pretty astonishing whenever you actually look at the damages of riots. They're actually pretty localised. They're usually down one street. And people have this image of, oh, the whole like place was on fire. No, it was one street. It was a Greg's and then a couple of shops next to it that were smashed in. Most people left when that violence started because they don't want to be part of it, and that's all just ignored because it doesn't help the narrative that, oh, this is what local concerns really are. It's just people wanting to smash a Greg's in. This is why rioting doesn't help, by the way. This is why Extinction Rebellion do and Just Stop Oil do really well, by the way. It's because they never delve into that sort of thing. And so it's really hard to try and say, oh, they're just people with no concerns who just want to riot. Because they don't riot. Like, honestly, that is a really good strategy. Credit to Roger Hallam for working that out. Anyway, we'll go on to my last point. My last point is about, it's more Labour in general, but it includes Labour councillors in Altrincham. It includes the Labour MP of Altrincham. I covered it in my last video on Altrincham, which, if you haven't watched, go watch it. Long story short, the MP ran and hide, didn't turn up to any of the council he turned up at one and effectively just got abused by the locals, which I'm not going to lie, I'll just find funny. Councillors kicked out Tory councillors from their meetings because effectively they didn't want to have to deal with hard questions. Labour council leader just did his usual Labour tricks of, oh, we're a diverse area in Trafford, we've got lots of diversity here, adding more diversity isn't going to make any problems whatsoever. But after I made that video, there was quite a long thread that was made quite famous on Twitter by a guy called By Appointment 2, who covers quite a few points that I made in the video, along with some extra points that I've not been through yet. But the main one I want to go through includes a small clip from a local residents' meeting where they are asking questions to Tory councillors who effectively are in quite a bad position where they have to be the messenger of bad news, while at the same time saying, we're doing what we can to sort this, which in the past I know for a fact they have helped with reducing the migrants in hotel problems in the area. So I feel quite bad for them, but let's get into the clip.
And there's things like their input to hospitals, doctors, dentists, the facilities we have. We're already fairly stretched, I feel, in the area. Is that going to be something?
So my understanding is they've contracted with GoDoc, which I think is the sort of nighttime service. It's a private doctor's system. And my understanding, that's not a statement of fact, but that should mean they won't be putting weight on our
It is just at a point where all the locals can do is laugh. They are literally learning here that while some people are on waiting lists for literally years to get appointments, I've had people in my family in this area who have been waiting so long to have relatively important surgery that they've had to go private. They literally had to go private because the NHS was taking too long. And what happens when these channel migrants come over? Instantly, they get better service, instantly, paid for by the taxpayer, obviously.
We're on 3 years waiting list at the hospital, and we're finding out that our service that's given to taxpayers in the UK isn't good enough. Are they headed transferred? Are they really seriously on
Again, well, let's find out. I think it's important. Is it a burden on us? Is the council paying for that? I know the council are getting some funding to support this. I know it's inadequate.
I mean, again, I feel quite bad for the councillor here, because he is a Tory councillor, and I know for a fact he is on the side of these local residents. He is just having to be the bearer of bad news here, unfortunately, so he is getting the brunt of all this frustration, which I completely understand the frustration. 3-year waiting list, and then these people have come over and instantly get a better deal than the actual taxpayers. They've contributed nothing and are getting more out of the system already. And, you know, the councillor here is saying, oh, I'm going to try and find out if the burden's on us. He's really finding out how much specifically is coming out of our council tax rather than coming from the government. You know, is it more a burden on Britain in general, or is it more of a burden on the local people? And either answer to that is pretty terrible. Because as Dominic Cummings says, whenever he's done focus groups, the main thing that is asked by people who care about channel migrants is always, you know, we're an island, why can't we just turn them round? And Dominic Cummings basically doesn't have an answer. There's no reason we can't turn them round. But It's kind of been gaslighted into the normies that, yeah, we can't actually turn them around, international law, whatever. But to which I keep having to say, no, other countries are doing that in Europe. People within the ECHR are turning people around at the border and sending them back. There is no reason we can't do that. And Richard Tice of Reform has gone into it before. As I say, I imagine over time, if the Tories don't take immigration seriously, which might take a bit longer under Kemi Badenoch for people to realise that she's not serious, then you're basically going to see an exodus of Tory councillors moving to Reform. Because Reform are the biggest party that are serious about immigration. You know, Tories had decades of chance to actually deal with immigration, and they made it worse. And Reform have that as, you know, their target, the Achilles heel of the Tories, if you will. So while this local councillor is trying to do what he can to help the local people and do what he can with the issue that they have with the Channel migrants, as mentioned in the other video, Labour don't care. Labour just want to send them somewhere. They're obviously going to send them to areas that generally tend to vote more Conservative, which this constituency has done for years, and basically managed to get this Labour parachuted guy in. Basically because, yeah, Reform exists and siphon a few votes away, but also because Sir Graham Brady was the MP for this constituency, and he stepped down, and people just didn't want to vote for the new guy that they didn't really know. They probably would have voted Graham Brady back in, though. I pretty much guarantee that. And so now Labour are taking advantage of it. Oh yeah, you can just put them in my constituency. I don't even live there. The guy lives in Norwich, for God's sake. Like, that's at the other side of the country, pretty much. And then obviously the Trafford councillor, who, again, was elected from other wards that aren't Altrincham and its surrounding area, has basically just said, oh, it's a diverse area, just put them there anyway. It's going to end in tears. You know, I mean this. I am looking at the local news of that area every now and then just to see if there's any news. Now, there's been none yet, but then again, it's been a week. But people in the area are already feeling less safe than they did 2 weeks ago. So why do we have a government that is making its own people feel less safe? Answer, because they care about plants and trees more than their own countrymen. Which, as I say, is a pretty accurate definition of evil. But I think with that, that's all the clips we're going to go through today. I'm sure if I put effort in, this will be a 24-hour video. But alas, we do not have time for that sort of thing. So with that, I will end it there. So showtime, we have the other side of the hill talks tonight, where we'll be going through quite a black-pilling number of videos, where we will be basically looking at street cam view of areas of England and Britain in the early to mid 20th century, where you know, things were just more beautiful. You know, we're having a bit of a nostalgia stream about things that we've never experienced and probably never will experience. So if you want that, please do come along to the Worcester Club, subscribe, join the Discord, all links down below. Tomorrow I'm finishing off Dustborn because I hate that game and need to finish it, and then videos out as and when they can be. Right, with that, please do subscribe, become a channel member, give super chats and super thanks. They all help the channel out an awful lot. And with that, that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.